The Unfinished Serenade. Long before I was even born, my mother lived through something unforgettable. With her blessing, I'm sharing it with the world. It was a bright summer day, the kind that lingers in memory like a dream. My mother was getting ready to head out with a few friends, to meet up with another group from church. She was especially excited. He was going to be there, the boy she had a major crush on. They had planned a picnic by the river, followed by the usual summer rituals: fishing, swimming, laughter carried by the wind. She remembered carefully picking out her best summer dress, tying a navy blue ribbon in her hair to match. When they arrived at their usual spot, he, whom she secretly called Mr. Charming, was already waiting. He was all smiles, his eyes lighting up the moment he saw her. Before she could even say hello, he stepped forward, offering to carry her bag. A true gentleman, and with every passing moment, she felt herself falling harder for him. After some snacks and light-hearted conversation, Mr. Charming took out his guitar. He strummed a few chords before beginning to sing, his voice weaving into the warm summer air. My mother swore she could feel it, like he was singing just for her. Everyone around them could see the spark. As the afternoon stretched on and the sun climbed higher, the heat became almost unbearable. The cool river called to them. Just before my mother could join the others in the water, Mr. Charming gently pulled her aside. "Can I come by your house later?" he asked, almost nervously. "I'd like to speak with your father." She hesitated only for a second before realizing what he meant. He wanted to formally ask my grandfather for permission to court her. Her heart nearly leapt from her chest. Overcome with excitement, she untied the navy blue ribbon from her hair and wrapped it around his wrist, securing it with a bow. "Take this," she said playfully. "Give it back to me later, so I know you won't change your mind." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I promise, I'll be there." The river was filled with laughter as people jumped into the refreshing water. The boys, including Mr. Charming, wandered further downstream where the current was stronger. The rocks higher, perfect for daring jumps. The girls stayed in the calmer section, chatting and splashing each other. Everything was perfect, until the screams started. Panic spread like wildfire. Someone was yelling for help. My mother ran towards the commotion, her heart pounding. Mr. Charming had jumped in, but he'd never come back up. Seconds stretched into minutes. Minutes turned into agonizing hours. He was gone. The river had swallowed him whole. A week later they found his body downstream. The navy blue ribbon was still tied around his wrist. Grief settled into my mother's bones. She was shattered. To feel close to him, she decided to learn guitar, the same instrument that had once carried his voice through the summer air. The first time it happened, she thought she was dreaming. A faint strum of guitar strings pulled her from sleep, lingering just long enough to make her question if she had really heard it. The second time, it was unmistakable. A few clear notes rang out in the stillness of the night, the first few chords of a song she knew all too well. It was his song, the one he had played for her the day he drowned. Goosebumps prickled her skin. She bolted upright in bed, eyes locked on the guitar hanging on the wall beside her. Nights passed. Nothing happened. She started to believe she had imagined it. Then came the night that no one in the house would ever forget. It was late, past midnight. The rain hammered against the roof, drowning the world in an eerie rhythm. Then, at exactly 3 a.m., the knocking began, loud, insistent. Everyone jolted awake. My grandfather grabbed a machete in one hand, a candle in the other. This was long before electricity had reached their countryside home. He moved towards the door, his voice steady but firm. "Who is it?" Silence. He waited, listened. The rain continued to pour, but no answer came. After a few tense moments, he opened the door. No one was there. He stepped outside, peering into the darkness. Nothing. Grumbling, he shut the door and told everyone to go back to bed. Just as they began to settle in, bang, bang, bang. The knocking returned, even louder this time. My grandfather stormed back to the door, ready to confront whoever was disturbing his household. But when he reached for the handle, he froze. The door was already open, and there, leading from the porch into the house, were wet footprints. My mother still gets chills when she talks about it. They never figured out who or what was knocking on the door, or who left the wet footprints on the floor. It's a tragic story, but an eerie one too. Some love stories never truly end. Some promises, no matter how impossible, are never broken. I prefer to stay in hotels and neighbourhoods with lots of local character, because I like to be fully immersed in the personality of a city. I've stayed in dozens of historic hotels across Europe and the US, many of which claim to be haunted. While all were beautiful and some were creepy, I never saw anything truly weird until a few months ago. In November of 2024, my girlfriend and I travelled from the US to London. We decided to stay in Soho due to its central location and unique character. After nearly settling on Mimi's hotel, I stumbled upon a lesser-known place just down the street called Hazlitt's. As soon as I saw the photos of the rooms, I knew we'd be staying there. We checked in at 3 p.m. on a weekday, and there wasn't a whole lot of activity in the lobby, so we were probably one of the only guests in the hotel at the time. Our overnight flight had taken 8 hours, and so to recharge and adjust to the time change, we decided to nap for a few hours before going out to the pubs. Our room key simply said, Sir William Ross. We walked up an old Georgian staircase until we found a door with the same name. The lock clanked, the door creaked, and the floor squeaked as we stepped into a small Gothic vestibule, through another old door, and then into a fully wood-panelled room where centuries of paint covered mouldings in thick globs. The weak autumn sun, obscured by clouds and heavy silk, failed to adequately light the room, so I switched on a lamp. The bedroom was cramped but well appointed with various antiques. Above our fireplace was an unsettling painting of a frowning old man. My girlfriend undressed and immediately climbed into the heavy oak bed, where she seemed to fall asleep almost instantly. I lingered in the bathroom, brushing my teeth and admiring the historic details. I glanced into the silent bedroom where something caught my eye. The next few moments lasted probably only a few seconds. At first, I thought I was looking at another oil portrait, one I hadn't initially noticed. But then I realised it didn't have a frame, nor canvas. It was a man, maybe in his 30s, standing near the corner of our bed, looking down at my sleeping girlfriend. He had parted and wavy brown hair of medium length, and wore a dark jacket with large lapels. His face didn't suggest anger nor malice, but a neutral observation, or perhaps mild curiosity, as though he just walked into the room and didn't expect to see someone sleeping there. The door to our room was locked, so I assumed a hotel worker had entered, and I was about to tell him this room was occupied. But then I realised it would have been impossible for him to have entered our room in absolute silence. That's when I noticed his clothes and hairstyle again. The reason I initially mistook him for a painting was because he looked like a character from a Jane Austen movie, but dressed simply and more somberly. My brain started to connect the dots. So there's a guy I've never seen before in our room who looks like he's from another century, who somehow entered without making even the slightest sound, even though this old hotel is creaky as hell. In a quiet panic, I felt a surge of adrenaline. It can't be. Holy shit, that's a ghost. I was in total disbelief and caught off guard. I'd always heard stories of hotel ghosts appearing in the middle of the night, but not in the afternoon, nor visiting almost as soon as you've checked in. He wasn't transparent, nor floating, nor glowing, nor a mist. It just looked like some guy was in our room. He didn't say anything, and I never saw him look at me, only at my girlfriend. Still, standing only 15 feet away with only an open doorway between us, I felt an intense sense of vulnerability, like there was an invisible spotlight on me. Now, growing up, my parents have only ever lived in old houses, so this wasn't my first weird experience, although it was my first one in probably a decade. I don't like to give these kinds of things attention, as I think it encourages them to interact with you even more. So I pretended like I didn't see him and turned my back to the sink. Still brushing. I ran the water and began to unnecessarily and clumsily jostle our toiletries around, trying to make some noise. I rinsed my mouth and turned back to the bedroom. He was gone. I stepped back into the bedroom with a feeling of being watched. There was nowhere a grown man could have hidden. I was obviously spooked, but slid into bed and told myself that this was just tiredness from the long flight and seeing things. Despite my unease, I fell asleep, and the rest of our trip was amazing. Now, some may question my response, but what was I supposed to do? Scream and throw my toothbrush at him, which would have woken up my girlfriend and made me look crazy? Jump through a window and become a ghost myself? Run out of the hotel half naked and be laughed at by staff? The room was already paid for, and it was going to be difficult finding a similar place in central London. The best solution was to ignore it and just hope it left us alone. According to law, the hotel is supposedly haunted by the ghost of William Hazlitt, a writer, who died in the building and who the hotel is named after. I found a portrait of Hazlitt, but to be honest, I don't think he looked much like the person I saw, although I suppose it could have been him. The rooms are named after his friends, which explains the name on the key, but other than that I don't know anything else about William Ross. I didn't tell my girlfriend my story until we were on our flight back to the States. She breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you for not telling me why we were still there," she said. She said she didn't see or feel anything weird, and I hadn't during the rest of our stay either. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't wake up each night in that room, glancing into the shadows, wondering if he'd returned.